All right, so good afternoon, kiddos. The last video that I'm going to do today is going to be a quick review of your poetry strategies, numbering your lines and stanzas, identifying rhyming words, identifying the rhyme scheme, looking for figurative language, and identifying descriptive words or sensory details in the poem. So the first step is we always make sure that you first begin by doing a quick read of the poem before you number your lines and stanzas. So I'm going to read. Make sure you're following along. How the little kite learned to fly. I never can do it, the little kite said, as he looked at the others high over his head. I know I should fall if I try to fly. Try, said the big kite, only try, or I fear you never will learn at all. But the little kite said, I'm afraid I'll fall. The big kite nodded. Ah, well, goodbye. I am off, and he rose toward the tranquil sky. Then the little kite's paper stirred at the sight, and trembling he shook himself free for flight. First whirling and frightened, then braver grown, up he rose through the air alone, till the big kite looking down could see the little one rising steadily. Then how the little kite thrilled with pride as he sailed with the big kite side by side. While far below he could see the ground and the boys like small spots moving around. They rested high in the quiet air, and only the birds and clouds were there. Oh, how happy I am, the little kite cried, and all because I was brave and tried. So we're going to go through and identify the type of poem that we're reading. So let's start with that. So again, there's 4 types of poetry, which is narrative, lyrical, free verse, and humorous. I know that it's not humorous because there was nothing silly or funny about the poem. Lyrical, it does not have a rhythm or a beat to it. It does express his feelings, but it's more so about telling us a story. So what I'm getting from here is a story about how the kite learned to fly. I also noticed that there's a character. The kite is a character. We have the little kite and we also have the big kite as characters. And remember, what type of poetry do we read that tells us a story? Well, that type of poetry will be a narrative. So I'm going to double check to make sure that I'm correct. I see characters. That's a part of a story. Is there a problem? Yes, there is a problem. The problem is that the little kite is afraid to learn how to fly. So it seems like he's afraid of heights, right? So that's the problem. Was there a solution? Yes, there was a solution. The little kite got over his fear. He decided to become brave and try on his own. So he floated up into the sky and then began to fly with the big kite. What did he learn? Was there a theme? Yes, there was a theme. He learned that you should always be brave. Okay, so the theme here was bravery. He was brave, and so because he was brave, he was able to learn how to fly. Okay, so therefore, the type of poem that we're reading is a narrative. It is telling me the story. It tells me what happened on the day that the little kite learned to fly. Okay, all right. So now we're going to number our lines and stanzas. Remember that when we see these numbers on the side, that means that some of the lines have already been numbered. Okay, so even though those numbers are there, I'm still going to rewrite my own. So I'm going to start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make sure that your numbers are lining up because that lets you know if you're counting correctly. 7, 8, line 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So there are 22 lines in this poem in total. Now I'm going to identify my stanzas. Remember that a stanza is a group of words that is often separated by a line break. So when I see this big white space here, that's considered a line break. That lets me know that I'm moving on to a new stanza. So this would be stanza 1, stanza 2, stanza 3, stanza 4, and the last 2 lines would be considered stanza 5. So there are 5 stanzas. So let's ask ourselves, why do we number the lines and stanzas when we're reading a poem? Well, majority of the time, you will have questions that will ask you about a particular line or a particular stanza. So our stanzas are kind of like paragraphs when we're looking at poetry, because when we're answering questions about a story, we go back to the paragraph to find the answer. With poetry, you'll go back to the stanza. And a lot of times the question may say, read line 12. So if you don't have your lines numbered, you're not going to know which one is line 12. It may say go back to stanza 1 and read line 2. If you don't have your stanzas numbered, you're not going to know which stanza is which. So it's always important to make sure you label your stanzas, number your lines, because the lines and the stanzas help you locate information in the poem. Okay? So now that we have our lines and stanzas, let's go to rhyming words. So in stanza 1, remember that when we're looking for rhyming words, you only use the last word in every line to determine if it rhymes. So line 1 is said and line 2 is head. Said, head. Said, head. Does it rhyme? Yes. So in stanza 1, my rhyme scheme, remember I start with letter A, will be A, because both words rhyme. I only give it a new letter if the first word does not rhyme with the next word, okay? All right, so now let's go to stanza 2. So I look at all of the last words, fly, try. One way that I know that they rhyme because they both have that Y, so they're gonna make that Y sound. So fly and try. All and fall. If you look at fall, fall actually has the word all in it, A-L-L. So of course it's gonna rhyme because it actually has the word in it. So they have the same letters. So we have all and then we have fall. We have by and then sky. So by and sky rhymes. Again, I hear the same sound. By, sky, yeah. That's the same sound that I'm hearing. So now let me do my rhyme scheme for stanza 2. So for stanza 2, we start with the letter A. If the next word rhymes with fly, then that word is also going to get the same letter. So this one will get an A because try and fly rhymes. Now, does all rhyme with try and fly? No, they don't. So I have to give all a new letter. So I keep going through the alphabets. So now I have A, this becomes B. Does fall rhyme with all? Yes. So if they have the same color, I'm going to give them the same letter because that means that they rhyme. Now we go to fly, try, by, sky. Do all 4 of those words rhyme? Yes, they do. They all have the y sound. Fly, try, by, sky. So all of those will get the letter A. So the rhyme scheme for stanza 2 would be A, B, B, A. And so what does that mean? This is the pattern of the rhyming words. So every 2 words rhyme, okay? So we see here every 2 words rhyme. Lines 3 and 4 rhymes, then you skip. You have lines 5 and 6 that rhyme, and then you have lines 7 and 8 that rhymes. So you have it to where every 2 lines are rhyming, okay? Let's go to stanza 3. So again, we look at the last word in every stanza. I see sight and flight. I hear the it, I-G-H-T. That's what I see. So here, sight rhymes with flight. Grown alone. Grown alone. I hear the n sound. So that means that those are also rhyming words. See and steadily. See and steadily. So again, the last two words that we see are see steadily. Those two words rhyme because I hear the long E sound. E, steadily, E. So I'm hearing that at the end. So that means that these two words must rhyme. Okay? So now I go to my rhyme scheme. Again, I start over with the letter A. Sight and flight rhyme, so they both get an A. Grown does not rhyme with any of those two words, so I have to keep moving through the alphabet. So that now gets a B. Grown and alone rhyme, so that gets a B. See and steadily are new rhyming words, right? They do not rhyme with sight and flight, so they have to get a new letter. That means this now becomes a C. See and steadily rhyme, so they both get the C. Okay, so do we notice if they do not rhyme, they have to get a new letter? Stanza 2 was different because the rhyme scheme was a little different. Buy and sky actually rhymes with fly and try. So that's why those four words had to get the same letters, because they actually rhymed with fly and try. Okay, so the rhyme scheme for stanza 3 would be A, B, B, C, C. So again, the rhyme scheme tells you the pattern of the rhyming words. What that means is every line rhyming? Is it every other line rhyming? Does lines 2 and 4 rhyme in every stanza? So that's what the rhyme scheme helps us understand. It's just like if you had a pattern where you were doing math and you would have a pattern of shapes where you would have maybe the first one is a triangle, then the next one's going to be a circle and a square, then the next one's a triangle. So you'll have it where every 3 shapes is a triangle. Okay, so here with our rhyme scheme, it's the same thing. You're putting the words in a rhyming order. And so what that means is, for example, with stanza 2, every 2 lines rhymed. So I put 2 lines together. Those, the first 2 lines are going to rhyme. The next 2 lines are going to rhyme. And then the other 2 lines are going to rhyme. Okay. All right. So let's go to stanza 4. Again, pride, side. I see the IDE in both pride and side, and it sounds the same. So these 2 words are rhyming. So again, I see every 2 lines are rhyming. First 2, second set, and then the third set. Ground, round. Ground and round are 2 rhyming words. They do not rhyme with pride and side. Okay, so remember, they'll get different letters. Air, there. Air and there sounds the same to me, which means that they are also rhyming words. So now I do my rhyme scheme. Remember that if the 2 words rhyme, they get the same letter. You always start with letter A. So pride gets an A. If there's a word that rhymes with pride, that word also gets a letter A. And so because side is highlighted as the same color as pride, that lets me know that these 2 words are rhyming. So side is also going to get an A. But ground does not rhyme with either side nor pride. So now I have to move on to the next letter in the alphabet. So ground would get a B. If there's a word that rhymes with ground, then that word also gets a B, which we already identified the rhyming word there. So round would be a B. Air and there does not rhyme with pride or side. It does not rhyme with ground or round. So therefore, I have to move on to the next letter in the alphabet, which is C. Air and there are 2 rhyming words, so they both have the same rhyme scheme. So here in stanzas 3 and 4, we see that the rhyme scheme is A, B, B, C, C. Okay. And our last stanza, cried and tried. These are definitely two rhyming words. I see the IED in both words, which means that they're going to have the same sound. So the letters here would be A. So we have a couple of different rhyme schemes in this poem. We have one rhyme scheme where the rhyme scheme is A, and I see that in stanzas 1 and 5. And then in stanza 2, we see that there's an A, B, A. Okay. And in stanzas 3 and 4, we see A, B, C. So what does that mean? That means that in every stanza, so I will count the letters 1, 2, and the numbers represent the line numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means in stanzas 3 and 4, there's a total of 6 lines. Every 2 lines are rhyming. Okay, every 2 lines rhyme. So you have 2, lines 1 and 2 rhyme. Then you have 4, lines 3 and 4 rhyme. And then you have 5 and 6, those 2 lines rhyme. So here's a rhyme scheme. That means that lines 1 and 2 are rhyming lines. Lines 3 and 4 rhyme. Lines 5 and 6 are also rhyming, okay? So that's rhyme scheme. Why do we use rhyme scheme? Because you will have questions that will ask you which lines in the poem rhyme. So if I asked you in this question, what lines rhyme, I can definitely say that lines 3 and 4 are rhyming lines. I can say that lines 5 and 6 rhyme, okay? That's why we have to identify the rhyme scheme, because it allows us to determine which lines actually rhyme. So now what we're gonna do is a quick overview for figurative language. So I first want to start off by saying there's 3 types that we've learned about this year, which are personification. Remember that personification is when you give a non-human object human qualities. So that's just like, think of Beauty and the Beast, where we saw the clock talking. We saw the candle that had hands, and the candles and the spoons, they were able to dance. You were personifying those objects, which means that you were taking a non-living thing and making it do something that only humans are, or a living thing is able to do. Okay, so when I look at this poem, the first form of figurative language that I've identified throughout the entire poem is personification. So personification is throughout the entire poem. The whole poem is about being personified. Why? Because they're making the kite talk. Yes, a kite can fly. We know humans can't. That's not what personified the kite. But throughout the poem, what made this a personification, or the figurative language in this as personification, is that the kite is talking. The kite is actually having a conversation with the big kite about being afraid. One other thing that I also noticed is that the kite has feelings. So the kite not only talks to the big kite, but it also has feelings. It tells you that he or she is afraid to fly. That's a feeling. Kites do not have feelings, so only humans can have feelings. So which means we personified the kite throughout the entire poem, okay? So what we're gonna go through is we're gonna look at each stanza, and we're gonna look for figurative language within the stanza. Then we will label that figurative language, okay? So here we know that the kite is talking, so I'm not gonna put personification throughout this. The 2 types that I'm gonna be looking for within the poem are similes and metaphors. Again, because the whole entire poem is an example of personification. So I go to stanza 1, I'm gonna read the lines. I never can do it, the little kite said, as he looked at the others high over his head. There are no forms of similes or metaphors here. And remember that a simile is when you take 2 things and you compare those 2 things. by using the words like or as. So you're going to tell me how the one object is similar to the other, but you're going to incorporate the words like or as. The rock was as hard as a desk, or the other way around, which is the desk was as hard as a rock. So you hear me using the word as, and I'm comparing the rock to a desk. Okay, so that's me comparing two things. A metaphor, however, is not going to use the words like or as. So a metaphor is just going to tell you that they're going to compare two things by saying this thing is this. So if I say that the desk is a rock, I don't literally mean that the desk is a rock. I'm just comparing the two things. I'm comparing a desk to a rock. And what do they have in common? They're both hard, right? So we don't want to use the words like, because then that makes it a simile. All right, so I know I should fall if I try to fly. Try, said the big kite, only true, or I fear you will never learn at all. But the little kite said, I'm afraid I'll fall. The big kite nodded, well, goodbye, I am off, and rose toward the tranquil sky. So in stanza 2, I did not see any forms of figurative language there. When I go down to stanza 3, the little kite's paper stirred at the sight, and trembling, he shook himself free for flight. That will be considered personification, but again, the entire poem is personified, so you're going to see personification in every stanza. First whirling and frightened, then braver and braver, up he rose through the air alone, to the big kite looking down, could see the little one rising steadily. So in stanza 3, there was also no forms of similes or metaphors there. Stanza 4. Then how the little kite thrilled with pride as he sailed with the big kite side by side, while far below he could see the ground and tiny boys like small spots moving around. So I'm going to stop at line 18 because it looks like here that they're comparing two things. They're comparing the boys to small spots, and they use the word like to compare those. So based on my definition for my figurative language, line 18 is an example of a simile. It compares the boys to a small spot, and what word do they use to compare them? They use the word like. So that's how I know it's not a metaphor. Now, if I wanted to make this a metaphor, I can say, and the boys were small spots moving around. So now I'm comparing the boys to the spots without using the word like. All right, so let's keep going. They rested high in the quiet air. So rested, again, that's a form of personification, but we've already identified the entire poem as being personified. And only the birds and clouds were there. Oh, how happy I am, the little kite cried, and all because I was brave and tried. So throughout the poem, we only saw one form of figurative language, which was a simile, but we also did see that the entire poem was personified, okay? So now we have our rhyme scheme, we have our rhyming words, we have our lines and stanzas. Remember, there's one last thing that we need to do before we dive into answering the question. We now need to look for sensory details or descriptive words, which is what we call adjectives. Adjectives are words that you use to describe something, words that you use to describe how something looks, how something smells, how it may taste, how it may feel. So what we're going to be looking for is any of the words that appeals to a particular sense. When we see that word, it helps us create an image in our mind. So that way we get a better understanding of what the person is feeling and what's actually happening throughout the poem. So we'll go through each stanza and we're going to look for descriptive words that describes. I never can do it, the little kite said. So noticing a word right away, little. So little is a word that you use to describe how something looks. It's the size of something. So that will be a descriptive word there. As he looked at the others high over his head, okay? I know I should fall if I tried to fly. Try, said the big kite. So now we have another descriptive word, which is big. They're describing the kite as being big. Or I fear you never will learn at all. But the little kite said, I'm afraid I'll fall. The big kite nodded. Ah, well, goodbye, I am off. And he rose toward the tranquil sky. So tranquil will be an example of a sensory detail because they're describing um, how the sky feels. So the kite is in there, and tranquil means peaceful. So we can't see the sky being peaceful, but we can feel the sky being peaceful, right? That's something, well, we won't feel it, but the kite would because he's up there in the air. All right. Then the little kite's paper stirred at the sight and trembling. So trembling is also a word that we use to describe. And trembling, he shook himself free for flight, first whirling and frightened, then braver. So frightened is a word that you use to describe how someone feels. Braver is also a word that we use to describe how someone feels. Up he rose through the air alone, till the big kite, looking down, could see the little one rising steadily. So we can see the little one. Little is a word that's describing. Steadily is a word that's also describing. Steadily is a word that describes what the little kite feels or looks like as it's rising, or how it's rising. Then how the little kite thrilled with pride. Thrilled is a sensory detail that describes how someone feels. As he sailed with the big kite side by side, while far below he could see the ground. And the boys like small spots, so that both of those would be considered sensory, small spots, okay? We're describing what it looks like. Small spots moving round. They rested high in the quiet air. Quiet is a word that is used to describe what it sounds like. And only the birds and clouds were there. Oh, how happy I am, the little kite cried, all because I was brave and tried. And again, brave is another descriptive word that describes how something or someone feels. So in this poem, we saw a couple of descriptive words. Little appeals to the sense of sight and lets you know what it looks like. Big also appeals to the sense of sight because it lets you know what it looks like. Tranquil is more of a feeling, lets you know how it feels. Trembling is also a word that describes how something feels. Frightened is a word that describes how you feel. Brave describes your feelings. Little describes what it looks like. And in this case, the little one rising steadily. Steadily describes what it looks like as it's rising up into the sky. Then we have the word thrilled. Thrilled appeals to the sense of feeling. It tells you how someone feels. Small will be a descriptive word that describes how something looks. Quiet is a descriptive word that tells you how something may sound. Okay, so those were all of our poetry strategies. So I would suggest that you make sure that you work through these strategies before you answer the questions, because these strategies will be able to help you better answer those questions. Alrighty, so that is it for today. Please reach out to me if you have any further questions about the types of figurative language, sensory details, or any of our poetry strategies that we normally use to help us understand the story better. Alrighty, guys.